Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Mission Motherhood. Today, though, we're going to be taking a little bit of a different route, a more inclusive route, and talk about all different kinds of families. I am delighted to have Mike Snaric and George Moore here on the show with me. Hello, guys.
Hello.
So great to be with you. I said this has been a long time coming. Before we get into all of it, let me read your bios. Mike Snaric and George Moore are husbands, dads, and co-founders building a more honest, ethical, and inclusive future for family building. Together for 16 years and married for 8. That's amazing. They are the proud fathers of twin 4-year-old boys, James and Anthony. They are precious, you guys. I have seen this family, and this is a family that they built through their own surrogacy journey, which became, of course, the foundation of the work that you do today. They are co-founders of Families Out Loud, a traveling conference and community organization on a mission to help make the world of assisted reproduction safer, more ethical, and better understood for the general public. What began rooted in the LGBTQ community has grown into a movement that welcomes and celebrates all paths to parenthood, which is so needed. I was also interested to see that you are co-founder of the Families Without Borders, a surrogacy agency based in Mexico City, dedicated to ethical, transparent, and compassionate care for intended parents around the world. So that's amazing. And with the goal that no family who's going on this path has to navigate the journey alone. And I think there really is strength in understanding how many diverse paths there are to parenthood. Because when I grew up, there was one. It was sort of mom and dad, and maybe not the greatest relationship in the world, I have to tell you, but stay at home mom, dad being the breadwinner. And, you know, when I started in my career, I really embraced feminism, but then I also just thought that the family thing was going to magically happen. It was going to I just meet the right person and I get pregnant easily. And that stuff just did not happen. And I was stuck in that one narrative. So it's so important, I think, to have a much broader perspective. So let's get into all of that. So, of course, many of our missions who are in this space are born out. So can you fill us all in on what that journey was like for the two of you?
Yeah. I guess, so our journey, I mean, was really born out of, we went on our first date 16 years ago, right? And our first date, we started talking about kids. Like, I was very sure that I wanted to have kids. Mike was very sure that he wanted to have kids. And we kind of agreed on, you know, yeah, like we definitely both want this. We didn't really know the path to get there. I think we both kind of knew that surrogacy existed, but we had no idea the cost, the emotional journey of it, how long it took, where to do it, how to do it. And it really wasn't, I guess mainstream is the right term for it. Like, it wasn't really talked about. And no one in my family went through IVF or talked about, if they did struggle with infertility, like, we didn't know about it. And so we just didn't know anyone. But it was kind of like that's kind of like our 10-year plan. Like, we'll have kids way later in life. We'll travel in the beginning. And so that's kind of where we both aligned, at least on the fact that this was the path that we were going to take, without necessarily knowing like all the steps to get there.
Yeah. And I think our mission to where we are today was really born out of our experience. And when we really dove into the IVF, the egg donation, and the surrogacy journey, we were naive, I guess I can use that word, into thinking that, like, you know, oh, this is a great brochure and there was a wonderful sales pitch, and, you know, let's just go with someone that's geographically close to us. And we essentially fell into every misconception pitfall that you could, right? And so
we were Googling a lot too, and trying to find like Reddit threads, and no one's situation really was like similar to ours. Like, or
at least we couldn't find it.
We really couldn't find it. Like, no one was like forthcoming with all the information. We're like, what? How much does this stuff cost? And who is the best doctor? And all of these things. And sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but that's what we really struggled with too.
Yeah, and where Families Out Loud was born is, so in ideology, it was born in, we wanted to support people after we had our journey. I'm not going to go into all the pitfalls, but really it was born out of we had a lot of issues on our surrogacy journey, not with our surrogate. Our surrogate's amazing. She's an incredible individual, but really with the support around that, right? Like setting up the monitoring appointments, making sure that we had the support of our agency. The insurance policy that we selected, bought, and purchased for our gestational carrier. Our sons were born prematurely at 30 weeks, had to be airlifted via helicopter to El Paso Children's Hospital from New Mexico. But fun fact, we didn't have parentage rights in the state of Texas. We had parentage rights in New Mexico, so we couldn't actually see our children when we got to the hospital.
Oh my goodness.
It was thing after thing after thing after thing. And we looked at each other and we were like, we understand that this is sort of out of the norm, if you will, right?
Yeah.
But we also were like, this must happen in some way, shape, or form, maybe not all of it together, but there are pieces of this that must happen to people throughout the way. And we want to educate people on how can you, at least to the best of your ability with the right partners, try to circumvent any of these issues from happening to the best of your ability. But then also, too, as we continued, we learned that like, okay, we thought we wanted to support the LGBT community, as you shared, but like, then I had a position that I recently left at San Diego Fertility Center, which was one of the best jobs I've ever had in my life, which was speaking with all different walks of life, right? So speaking with the LGBT community, members of the heterosexual community, single by choice, who are just really wanting to do this because they're sick and tired of waiting for that significant other, or they've had a divorce, or they had some kind of infertility or cancer diagnosis or whatever that may be. And we said to each other, well, heck, like, why don't we try to assist everyone? Just because we heard so many stories of people who it sounded as if like our heterosexual friends were the ones who were arguably even more lost, the most, right? Yeah. Like, at least a lot of the members of the LGBT community, they know that there's some kind of third party that needs to come into play here.
Yeah.
But a lot of our friends who are in straight relationships were saying to us, like, I don't even know. Like, I grew up, like you were saying, thinking that this is what my life was going to be.
Or you get a diagnosis and you're kind of just like dropped in the middle of the ocean. You're like, okay, well, now what? Like, who do I talk to next? And we're very visible and open on like Instagram, for example, about our family. And like, we show like all the things that we do and the journey from start to finish. And so because we were so open and honest about our journey, we got a lot of messages from people on Instagram. And so we would get all these DMs of people saying like, please, like, how did you start? Like, where did you go? How did you find your egg donor? Like, what did you guys talk about? How did you find your surrogate? How did you find your clinic? And so that was kind of the impetus for like, okay, like, let's do this on a larger scale and like, let's bring in more people. And then plus like the trans folks, like there were so many trans couples and trans individuals that were reaching out to us saying like, can I even do this? Like, I love that you guys have a family and you're so open about it. Can I do something like this? And obviously the answer is yes, but like they didn't know that. And there's no conference that was out there that was willing to help every single pathway. And so that's kind of where we found our niche.
I think that's, and your niche is kind of broad because there's all these, right? Because there's all these great flavors. So, well, is there anything more that you would want to talk about? You talked about the medical aspect often being so confusing. I was just going to kind of break this down in a few different areas that you talk about. So what that you haven't mentioned about the medical side of things was particularly difficult for you guys?
So, I mean, for us personally, I think really understanding like embryo quality, donor age considerations, right? So our donor was almost 30 years old. And when you think about it, right, a woman who's 30 years old, she's not old by any way, shape, or form. Right. However, biologically and reproductive wise, 30 is older, right? And we were never really understood, should we consider another egg donor potentially? Thankfully, the embryos that we were able to create were good enough quality to be able to move forward.
And they weren't even amazing. It wasn't
amazing, right? So for like anyone who is studying embryos, they were day 4 embryos, right? So for anybody who
versus day 5 embryos, right.
Right. So day 5 embryos are the more preferable embryos. And then there's obviously day 6 and 7, and there's even day 3s. But like, I don't think anybody should live or die by embryo grading. I think that PGT testing and I'm not going to get into it, but there's different kinds of PGT testing as well. But PGT testing is something that I do think is extremely important, understanding the chromosomal makeup and the cellular makeup of the embryos. We didn't understand it, right? Like,
no idea. It was like so far over our heads.
We heard like, oh, you have PGT normal embryos, and we're like, okay. Right. So not fully understanding that.
We also were doing a double embryo transfer, which I think, had we known, like our doctor, he let us know, like, hey, like, listen, there's some risks here, right? I don't think that we fully understood the risk of like the NICU, for example, and like what that actually looked like. And when you're not prepared for a NICU experience, I mean,
it's terrifying.
It's terrifying. And
my gosh, whole nother show too, because my daughter was in the NICU for 40 days. And by the way, we did not have sufficient genetic testing. They did not test my now ex, and he had an undetected chromosomal deletion that created some catastrophic situations. My daughter was lucky to survive, but she was what, 6 weeks premature. So, and we struggled through that. I mean, no one can prepare you for that. It is so hard.
Yeah. And we try to, at Families Out Loud events, we try to walk people through at least like somewhat of the NICU journey. That way, if that's the last time they ever hear about the NICU, at least they have some sense of like brace for impact, like this is a lot. And and James was in the NICU for a month. Anthony was there for 2 months, and we're in New Jersey. The boys are in El Paso. And so we were flying across the country using as many credit card points. Save your credit card points for anyone listening. Yeah. Because we were using every credit card point we had to fly back and forth.
Well, and how difficult is that to be apart? I mean, I remember we were there except for the 3 hours we weren't allowed to be there, I think. And then when I say we, I mean me and my 70-year-old mother who was with me the whole time. It wasn't sort of a spouse situation, but wow, that is so challenging to be a distance away.
Well, and it was, I have to say that the staff shout out to El Paso Children's Hospital, the staff there was incredible, and they really held us by the hand. We were there for over 2 weeks to start off, and the staff was like, go home. They were like, and they were basically like, they told us, they were like, there is nothing that you being here, because we were spending a fortune on the hotels. They asked us about Ronald McDonald House, right? And like all of this, and they were like, we love you guys. You have the NICView, which is like the Wi-Fi camera that you can view 24/7. They gave us each of the nurses' direct cell phone numbers and the direct line to the NICView. They were incredible. And they were like, you text us, you call us. If you have any questions, if you need anything, we'll FaceTime you, we'll video you, whatever it is that you want. Will do, which they made it incredible.
Yeah. And so I think when we talk about the medical and not knowing that piece, I think there's like the emotional component that's like weaved into what we didn't know about medical and how that impacts, your journey and the emotional toll that all takes on you. So I think those two are kind of are for our journey, at least, are blended together.
Yeah. And I think there's another two factors that we should hit on that not necessarily were impacted us directly, but that we've encountered is that, so number one, male factor infertility, right? So I think a lot of people are talking about women's infertility, right? Like a lot of women that I speak with, whether they are 40 years old and not able to potentially leverage their own genetic material, or they're not able to carry, or God forbid they've had a cancer diagnosis or a hysterectomy or whatever that may be, right? We're not able to leverage their own genetic material. Whereas gentlemen, they may also have their own issues, right? But so often culturally in our society, gentlemen think that they're not the problem, and they don't feel as though they need a semen analysis or to have an understanding of what their genetic material looks like or is doing.
It's so
and
important.
It is arguably just as, if not more important, right? That, a gentleman involved, or whoever is the sperm provider in the particular scenario, is having that testing taken care of. And the next is sort of those infectious diseases. So whether you're HIV positive, undetectable, or whether you have hepatitis B, I think that understanding that you still can have a child and there are pathways forward for you. There may be an extra step or two, there may be some additional disclosures, but there are people, there are physicians, there are clinics, there are surrogacy agencies and surrogates that are willing to help you on your journey, regardless of what your status might be.
That's amazing. I mean, such good information. And actually, there's going to be an episode about male factor infertility and some of the companies like Legacy that are doing at-home sperm testing. And the other piece of that is men do have a biological clock that's not as intense as women's, but sperm quality does degrade with age. And I think that's something important to know. Guys,
Yep.
just wanting you to know that. Well, great. So another area is ethics that you really talk about. So let's dig into that one. Why don't you tell me what were some of the things about the process that caused some ethical, concerns or things that really need improvement?
Woof. Oh boy.
I'm trying to think
Get into it, guys.
Yeah, it's so funny because like we talk about ethics a lot, right? And ethics is such a loaded word. Obviously, there's degrees on it, right? So I think that it's important to talk about that.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, a lot of times when we talk about ethics, we talk about how, like, as an intended parent, you're not thinking about ethics, right? You're not thinking like, oh, is this agency ethical or is this doctor ethical? You're more thinking,
I just want a baby. Like,
right.
I just want a healthy baby. What do you
trust this person? It's more about trust, and from trust, like you only get trust when a doctor or an agency is very transparent with you, like very honest with you. And so that's what we try to really lean into when we're talking about ethics, as like the word, as like this like amorphous kind of thing. So that's one thing that I would say is, like, I think you have to be able to really trust your provider and really make sure that the provider, agency, whoever you're working with, like, you can really believe what they're telling you, and you don't know what you don't know going into this, right? And so I think that we were kind of like building the plane as we were flying it, and I think a lot of intended parents go into this process building their plane as they fly it. And so you really have to make sure that your agency knows what they're doing. If you're an LGBTQ couple, like, ensuring that you're asking the questions of your agency, like how many couples like ours have you helped in the past, like, and some of those things, looking at their forms, and are their forms inclusive of everyone, and those types of like little tiny things can really give you a solid glimpse into how that agency runs or how that clinic runs. I think that's important.
Yeah. And go ahead.
Now, do you have like a checklist of some of those kinds of questions to be asking? I'm just so interested in that. I mean, like, for example, one area that I've become learned about recently is with sperm donors. The sperm banks don't really track how many children are resulting and how long you allow a donor to give samples and stuff. And I've heard of situations where there's like 100 children that are, that become known through social media and stuff. Like, my son's a donor conceived child. And so I've been delving into that recently, and that's an ethical, concern. It's less so with egg donation because you can't, it's not as abundant, but I would love to see a checklist around, all those kinds of questions to ask.
Yeah. Well, so George, in a way, like on our social media, he did create somewhat of a checklist, but it's
like red flags and green flags.
Yeah.
Like
Okay.
But sort of backing up really quick, I think, and Cheri, you understand this as well from your own lived experience, is that there becomes this, like the scales of justice, if you will, there becomes this desire versus ethics, right? And sort of the desire to have a baby slowly starts to outweigh the ethics, right? And the more that an individual has struggled, the more that a person has gone through, and I know you know this personally, right? Having pregnancy loss personally, having had to shift sperm sources, having had to shift egg sources, right? You start to sort of, ethics starts to begin to take a back seat, but it never should, right? And it's not because you're mentally or psychologically saying, oh, well, I don't care about ethics, that goes out the window. Of course you care about it, but really your desire to have the family that you've always wanted supersedes anything really ethically that you're thinking about. Like you mentioned earlier, you just want this baby, right? Or these babies. And
right.
So I think that's extremely important to understand. I also just want to talk a little bit about two organizations that exist in the United States But as we know, there's nothing that's a standard that anyone can sink their teeth into, unfortunately, in assisted reproductive technology. There's no governing body, if you will.
Exactly. That's part of the issue.
Right. But there are two bodies that a provider that you're working with should interact with. The first is SEEDS, so the Society for Ethics in Egg Donation and Surrogacy. We're members of SEEDS. It's a great organization that provides these guidelines, right? These checklists for agencies, for clinics, for egg donation agencies and sperm donation agencies. And fun fact, one of our sperm donation agencies that we partner with, being that you mentioned it, actually limits their sperm donors to only 6 donations, whereas the national standard is 20, as you're saying. And you could have hundreds of children as a result of that, whereas it's coast-to-coast sperm donation, they actually only limit to 6, which is identical to the egg donor, right? So they have a stance, which I really love, is that why should the women be any different in these scenarios than the men?
Right.
And so I do really, really appreciate that. And the next is the American Society of Reproductive Medicine, which I know you know. And I really just can't help but feel that, you know, if your clinic isn't following the ASRM guidelines, or your doctor isn't following the ASRM guidelines, like, for example, ASRM guidelines say that you shouldn't do a double embryo transfer, right? Which we did, right? Now, that's not to say that our doctor isn't following them, but what that means is that our doctor looked at our gestational carrier, looked at her medical records, looked at us, looked at the quality of our embryos, and said, listen, we can go down this route. It may not be the safest route for your gestational carrier and for you, but why we love our doctor and why a lot of clinics that do double embryo transfers, they do say, this is how we're going to counsel you. It's not the safest way, but we will leave that decision up to you and to your gestational carrier, which I also appreciate.
Yeah, I did a double as well. My daughter, and then my son, who unfortunately did not live. But but the other piece of ethics is that there's no like federal regulation. I mean, it's sort of optional, right? It's something that they choose to do versus in other places there's maybe more oversight. And I think that's why one judge called it the Wild West in a way, because it really is. There are clinics who care more about abiding by these things than others. So it's a great point that you make. The other part about that you're passionate about is building community. And I know that you have these great events that you do, and maybe you could talk about those for a moment and what someone can expect when they go to a Families Out Loud event.
Want me to go first?
Sure.
Yeah. So I think what makes Families Out Loud great, and we're biased, but what makes it so great is that you can walk into a Families Out Loud space and immediately feel comfortable, right? Like, everyone there, it's a very casual setting. It's not like a stuffy conference by any means. We try to make it fun and enjoyable when you're there. Like, there's enjoyable music playing. It's like an easy, casual setup.
There's food and drink.
Like, everyone's
meant to like nosh and just enjoy.
And
I'm coming.
Please come. What's so great is that there will be a trans couple and maybe a single gay man and a hetero couple, and they're all in the same room. And what's so crazy, and we've witnessed this so many times, is they're sharing their experiences and they're sharing very similar emotions about very similar barriers that they're facing or questions that they have. And it's so quick that everyone realizes, like, oh, we're kind of like all on this journey together. And the questions that one person asked was what another person was thinking about. And so it just like, it spurs all these other conversations. And, you know, we'll have our panels and everyone will talk and we'll go through the legal aspects and the financial aspects and the clinical aspects. And then you'll see all these different couples and singles all gather and kind of talk and say, oh, remember, did you hear what they said? And hear what that part. And it's just so fascinating to see all these people from all different kind of walks of life come together on the same thing. And so when we say community, like, we're not just bringing like a bunch of LGBTQ plus people into a room or a whole bunch of heterosexual people into a room and just like letting them just like sit there and learn. You are meeting people that you can relate to and understand and empathize with. And you might create relationships there that you bring with you outside of Families Out Loud. And that's exactly what we hope happens, right? Like, in community, there's support, and some people come to Families Out Loud without any support system outside of that, right? And so you're leaving Families Out Loud. You get Mike and I for the rest of your life if you want. We're available whenever you want. But you also get the other people that are there, and the people that are attending as IPs, but also like anyone who's there as a vendor or a provider, the agency owners, the doctors that are there. These are all people who want to be there, right? Like they are so passionate about this work, and no one that's in that room is anyone that's there is someone that Mike and I would trust on our own journey, right? So that's really important to us. And so the people that are there aren't just there because they chose to pay a sponsorship, right? Like they're there because like we see them as ethical, good, like these are humans who want to help you have a baby. And so it's very important to us. So that's what we say when we say community. It's everyone in that room is really there for the right reason.
Right.
Yeah. And to piggyback on some of that too and expand upon it is that like, what's so beautiful about it, you touched on it with the vendor side, and our vendors have come back to us and said, and our sponsors have said, when I know I can't help someone in particular or match them, I will call another Families Out Loud sponsor and say, hey, I met this beautiful couple. I can help them, but you should. So not only have we created a community of intended parents and parents, but we're creating a community of sponsors
that trust each other.
Oh, that's great.
Intended parents that come to us. Now they have a full network of people available to them that are working together all towards the same goal. We have a philosophy that high tide raises all ships, right?
Yeah,
it should be competitive,
right. Yeah, absolutely.
And I mean, it feels gross that like there's a lot of entities out there where it's like you're buying a baby kind of thing. And that's just like, we don't like that rhetoric. There's different ways in which people talk about it that it feels that way. And that just feels gross, right? Like it just doesn't feel right. And I just think that like, for example, in our San Diego event, we're having a couple who we met over 2 years ago when Families Out Loud just started. They had no idea what they were doing, and now they're pregnant with twins and they're due in a few months, right? And it's been so cool to watch them go through their journey, and they're going to be speaking at one of our events to other intended parents.
And they've worked with all Families Out Loud folks.
All Families Out Loud folks who have been to all
wow.
Which is just so beautiful. We just had another couple that we met who was just published in a digital magazine called So.Gay that really is just getting started on their journey, and they didn't even know where to start, have attended a few Families Out Loud events, and have just shared that like that community, the community of individuals, not only of the sponsors and the professionals, but of the other people that they've met at the events, has just been invaluable to them. So, it's just so nice that we're like, okay, because as an entrepreneur, and this, like, you're always like, am I doing the right thing?
I'm trying to save the world, but am I?
Right.
A little bit?
Yeah.
Well, what I've learned about that is that impacting one life or one story is effectively saving the world, because the ripple effects of even one family being able to be formed is huge, right? So one of the things we talked about before we got on was how sometimes family and friends aren't always the best source of support during this kind of journey. I don't know what's happening here. Oh, there you are.
There we are. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. So did you hear me? Just why, friends and family not being maybe the best people, and why, having a community that really can relate is so important, and what your experience was there.
Do you want to go first?
Yeah. Let me start. So I think that everyone comes with a different lived experience, right? And I think, I've heard this time and time again, and I'm going to reference the LGBT community and then I'll move on from there. As a member of the LGBT community, what's so frustrating about it is that, I don't know if you've ever heard the saying, you never just come out once, you have to come out every single day. And I think that that's really difficult, right? And for a lot of people, especially for singles, right? Regardless of whether you're a lesbian or you're gay or you're bi or you're trans or you're non-binary or whoever intersects, whoever you are, right? You are constantly coming out. And that gets exhausting in and of itself. And then having to come out, but then also explain that you want to grow your family, and you're growing it through this I hate the word non-traditional, but through a different way, right? Than a lot of other people are growing their families. And I think that really gets exhausting, but even more so, there are so many individuals in our community that don't have the support of their families or their immediate families, that unfortunately now there's been so many political divides, especially now in the United States. The temperature is really hot politically, and it's really caused a lot of rifts in a lot of families across our country and internationally, and caused a lot of issues. Like there's a lot of international parents that are choosing not to move forward with surrogacy in the United States because of our current administration and the threats to birthright citizenship, right? So like that's something that is deeply concerning to a lot of people, regardless of your sexual orientation, right? And so, you know, getting back to the family and friends thing, I think that if you don't have the support of your direct family and friends, it's the community that we were talking about a little bit earlier, that you have, that growing that community, your chosen family, if you will, right? The people who are going to support you through thick and thin, who are going to be there, the counselors, right? And George and I have become the chosen family for a lot of individuals, as I know you have, people that you maybe didn't think would be in your life, and now they've become some of the most important people in your life, right? Like Elizabeth Carr, first IVF baby ever in the United States.
Yeah, she's amazing. Yeah,
became one of our best friends through this entire process, right? Never in a million years would have thought that we would have called someone like that our best friend. But this is what I mean. Like, you know, your tribe, if you will morph and change as you're going through this experience.
I also think that you're specifically on family, like your family, I guess friends too, like they could have great intentions, but completely misguide you, right? And so at the end of the day, like this is your journey. And so deep down in your gut, whatever you think in your gut, we always tell people is like, go with that, because like you've thought it, you've marinated on it, it's running through your head when you're sleeping, like go with your gut. I'll give you a perfect example. Is because when Mike and I told my parents that we wanted to have kids and we were going to go through this thing, you know, IVF and have a surrogate and get an egg donor and do the whole thing, my parents looked like they had seen a ghost, and like their heads were going to also spin off because it was way too much for them to process. And the next time we talked to them about it, like maybe like a week or two later, you know, my dad was like, you know, I really don't think you guys should do this. And like, this sounds like a lot. And like, you know, I don't know if you guys really want to like go through all of that. Like, what if it doesn't work, blah, blah, blah.
And just to provide an asterisk, this is honestly one of our largest like cheerleaders and supporters.
Huge
like
supporter.
He is like a huge supporter and someone that we go to for advice with like everything. So for him to say that was
he's like usually my moral compass for everything.
Yeah.
And he's like, why don't you guys love traveling? Just keep on traveling. Like, just be bachelors. If you could live anywhere in the world, just keep on doing that. And after that, like Mike and I were like, oh God, like, should we not do this? And then we're like, no. Like, we've gotten this far. Like, let's keep pushing. And like, if it doesn't work, then it's just not meant to be. Like, and we'll try. And we tried. Fast forward, my dad is obsessed with these kids.
Yes.
And he also apologized and was like, you know, I'm so sorry that I was about to lead you down a completely different path. He was like, these two kids are the best thing that's ever happened to me. And being a grandpa is the best experience I've ever had. And I'm so sorry. And that kind of validated that for us, right? And I think taking advice from someone who hasn't gotten to the destination that you're trying to get to is not a great idea. Go find someone who's gotten to the place where where you want to get to. That's who you take advice from, because they've been through the ups and the downs. They've felt all the feelings. They've done all the things. And so I think that's the advice I would give someone if you know you're talking to friends and family about it. They probably have great intentions, but just aren't informed enough about it.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Well, one topic that is really a hot button for me is how we teach all of our young people about sex education, abstinence, contraception, STDs, but we teach them nothing about fertility.
Oh my God.
You know, the thing that is, you know, sort of at the core of the survival of our species. And so, what do you think that young people need to know, and maybe even particularly gay young people might need to know at an earlier age?
So I want to start by, we were invited, believe it or not, by the government of Canada to go to this beautiful party called the Pink Gala that was hosted in Toronto. And it really is a celebration of the LGBTQ community, but a family building. And we had the honor of hearing the superintendent of the schools of Toronto speak on education around sex education, but around the LGBT community as well. And if everyone in the United States and every superintendent and every educator who listens to your podcast should take a page out of this woman's book, because the sex education, the education around different kinds of ways to develop your families, your feelings as a young person, around your sexual orientation, your gender expression, and all of that, Canada's doing it right, friends. Like, Canada has amazing discussions around this, right? Or at least the province of Ontario is, that like they're doing a beautiful job of how they're teaching young people about sex education, around gender expression, around sexual orientation. And I think, as we all know, in the United States, we really do drop the ball here. To actually answer your question, you know, I think there's a lot of different things. I think that sex education really, I don't think has really changed probably since like the 1950s or 60s.
I think you're right. Yes.
You know, and I think that there's a lot of conversations, right? Like having conversations with women. This is one thing we talk about all the time. Letting women know it's okay to pursue your career and become that powerful woman CEO, but not to compromise on your family and freeze your eggs when you're younger. And I think that health insurance, and it is starting to happen, but access to preservation of your genetic material needs to be a discussion in sex ed.
Just knowing your options, like how can you pump the brakes on this? Like, yeah, I have a biological clock, but like there are so many ways to like get around that as an obstacle in life. Like that should not control your entire life of like just your body. And there's so many other ways to go on this journey that I think in sex ed they just completely miss, obviously. And I think as a little gay boy who was sitting in sex ed, who's already confused about sex, going in middle school, being like, well, wait a second, I'm gay. None of this applies to me except for wearing a condom. What does this even mean? What do I do? And not having any resources is really hard.
Yeah, or even education around PrEP, right? For HIV prevention, right? And access to that. Or, you know, just I think that we're understanding or having children read some kind of pamphlet or dialogue on what it means to be a member of the LGBT community, right? Because like George said, like being I knew I was different inside, but I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know what anybody else's lived experience was. I thought everyone felt this way. I thought, well, do I just have to try with the opposite sex for that to be normal? Like, is that normal? Are my feelings normal?
We could have a whole other podcast.
Right. I know we could. And I think, you know, not telling young people about reproductive timelines, about fertility, and some of the things that they can do. One of my passions is going out to colleges and speaking with people about this, because we send everyone out into adulthood and they have a lot of preconceived notions. And a lot of time they say, oh, well, medical science will just handle this. Well, that isn't always the case. And so it's a real passion of mine. And Cheri's Choice, my nonprofit, will be offering egg grants in 2027. So I'm hugely excited about that. Yeah. So that's a big, you know, I think we have to help. Well, you're sweet. I think we have to help people along in some of those journeys, and we're just not. And how can we sit here and complain about the birth rate and then not do things to help, right?
1,000%.
Absolutely.
Oh my gosh. So let's see. One of the other things, you know, we talked about surrogacy, and one of the things I wanted to come back to on that, the US political climate, but I was speaking with someone from Europe too, who said that most of Europe, surrogacy is against the law.
Yeah.
So what would you recommend to someone who lives in Europe? You know, it just, I mean, it's so heartbreaking to me how many families will be impacted. Both, I've talked to women who have had multiple miscarriages and surrogacy is their only option. And I think that gay men have the hardest job because they don't have any other choice but to use a surrogate. I mean, the biology is just not going to add up. So yeah, what advice would you give to people who are somewhere where this is not even allowed?
Well, so I mean, we can use Italy as an example, right? So obviously that's hot topic, right? So because of their prime minister's very deep Roman Catholic beliefs, that it was outlawed there.
And we heavy sigh because we hear this all the time, and it's our friends, and even especially in the U.S., I feel like everyone's just outpriced by it as well, and so it's like the political climate, the cost, and like so many people are just it's just not even an option for them anymore because of both of those things. But I'll go ahead and talk about Italy.
Yeah, I just think that, unfortunately, whether someone, regardless of who you are, needed to jump through the hoop that is surrogacy, I think countries in Europe have now there's the hoop, now the hoop is on fire, right? And so, however, that doesn't mean you can't jump through it, right? And that doesn't mean there's just not a pathway forward. It just means it's going to be more complicated and take some more work. It doesn't necessarily mean it's going to even cost more money. It just means that, going all the way back to the ethics conversation, you partnering with someone who is going to be able to assist you in the best, most ethical way possible, right? And that's really where a lot of parents stumble, because there was that whole desire and ethics conversation, right? So for a European family to really make sure that they can return home safely and have the correct documentation and parentage that they're going to need to be able to live in their countries safely, right? We don't ever want someone to recommend, or for someone to be recommended, a pathway that isn't going to be legal in whatever country that they are going to return home to. But that's not to say that a couple from Italy, a same-sex couple from Italy, can't move forward with surrogacy. It just means that they are going to need to country hop in order to really get home.
Yeah,
right?
It's possible. It's just much more complex.
And citizenship for their child might be complicated. However, what they need to understand is that there is a pathway forward for them. They just have to have a level of comfortability with what that pathway actually looks like.
Gotcha. And so this really kind of segues into this Families Without Borders and the surrogacy agency in Mexico City. So tell us a little bit about that. And is that part of the, part of the answer to some of these legal, some of these legal barriers?
I think it's part of our answer. And like I said, we've talked to so many of our friends who want families. We've met so many couples or singles or whoever who want to have families, but they just cannot afford it. And so that's where we started to approach it. It was like, how can we make this more affordable? Like, there's grants out there. There's obviously there's like financing and there's things like Gaia and there's all these things. But a lot of the times, like, it's just the total that folks can't afford, right? Mm-hmm. So I think Families Without Borders was kind of our answer to that. And we kind of sat down and were like, okay, well, we have the network in the US of, the clinics and the lawyers. And so, thinking about it from an IP's perspective, we're like, okay, like, we'd probably feel comfortable if we did everything in the US medically. And then, if we had to find our surrogate in Mexico, like, we already found our surrogate in El Paso the one time, like, that's not that big of a jump, right? And so we thought about it that way. And so we kind of felt comfortable with opening an agency where, you could do part of it in the US medically, and then part of the other part in Mexico. And so you could apply that to Europe, you could apply that to Australia. And so we're like, okay, like, we actually can help people globally if we open an agency like this and kind of did like this hybrid surrogacy approach. Or if people feel comfortable enough, they can do their entire journey in Mexico as well, right? Like, that is a possibility. And we started to grow relationships with the clinics in Mexico, and there's some really great clinics there and doctors that we kind of started to work with. And so I think that's really our answer to the dilemma that a lot of people are facing.
And let's just talk like raw, like, numbers and also just some ethical facts, right? And so raw numbers is, in 2016, 1 in 10 families couldn't afford surrogacy in the United States. In 2026, it's now 1 in 6 can't afford it, right? And so the cost of surrogacy back when George and I did it has now almost doubled, right? So we completed our journey in 2021. So 2021. And that is only 5 years ago, right? And the cost really have doubled since.
And our cost total was what, 220?
It was around 200.
Oh my gosh. I mean, we're talking a house in a lot of places.
Right.
I mean.
Right.
And we got 2 children out of that cost. And now in the US, that's the cost for 1 child, right?
Right.
Basically.
So George and I, when we're presenting on the costs, we roughly share that the costs for using a same-sex male couple, or even for a single individual who needs one piece of genetic material or even both, you're looking at roughly $250,000, roughly, is what your spend is going to be from starting from nothing to bringing home baby.
For a U.S. journey.
For a U.S. journey. Can you find some partners that are going to help you circumvent costs?
Totally.
Yes. Are there different amazing insurance or providers that can help mitigate that cost, like Carrot, like Progeny, like Maven? Yes, and these are beautiful programs that have helped a lot of people. However, the cost of surrogacy alone, right? Surrogates compensation in the United States has changed wildly. Starting compensation for surrogates in the US is around $55,000. The average compensation for a surrogate in California is now $65,000 to $75,000 starting, right? Starting. And so the journey that we're providing in Mexico, the full surrogacy journey from soup to nuts, all in cost is $95,000, right? So we are lopping off roughly $100,000 when it comes to cost by virtue of the fact that we're working in Mexico. And I think what we've worked so hard to do is dispel the stigma that of medical tourism, that you're going and you're using brown women to have your children. That's not it, right? Like, that's not it at all.
Right.
These individuals that we've met in Mexico City are super excited to be going on this journey. And fun fact, friends, is that surrogacy has been happening in Mexico far longer than the United States has even realized that it's been happening. But, it was at one point outlawed in Mexico because it was the Wild West, if you will. And now it's back, but we need to be careful. So what George and I created was taking US procedure and ethics and bringing it to Mexico. Wow. So we do everything at our agency the way that a surrogacy agency in the United States does it, from mental health evaluations, social worker evaluations,
legal representation,
visits, home visits, clarity and transparency, having third-party escrow through the entire process where all parties have visibility into what's happening with the money, full transparency with the attorney that has U.S. border representation. So we have a U.S. attorney and a Mexican attorney both reviewing the agreement so that it satisfies the qualifications for the intended parents, and also European as well. So anyone who has familiarity with those particular laws in that country, and Australia too, right? As well as in Asia. So we want to make sure that our intended families feel very secure and feel very safe when they're going through this journey in Mexico. Unfortunately, for a lot of people in the United States, and again, because of our president, there's a lot of stigma around Mexico as a country. And it's a beautiful place, right?
Oh, yes. In Mexico City in particular. Yes. Yeah.
We fell in love.
We fell in love with it, right? Like, we were like, oh my gosh, this is an incredible place.
Before we opened the agency, we're like, okay, we're going to go there. We're going to see how we feel about this place. And like, if this is somewhere where we feel comfortable with our child walking around, not walking in a womb somewhere, in a surrogate. And we left being like, yeah, look, this is a great place and safe. And we were there when there was a bunch of stuff going on on the news about Mexico, and it was lovely. And you couldn't even, you didn't know what was happening. Yeah, there was nothing really, there really was nothing happening in Mexico City. And it was just such a safe space and a safe place. And we felt welcomed as two gay men, to be exactly who we are and very open. It felt very safe. And so we're like, okay, this is a good spot. Yeah.
That's amazing. And I know that there are people who are offering egg freezing for a fraction of the cost there as well. So, that's something that I'm looking into with, everything that's going on at Cheri's Choice. So amazing. Thank you so much for putting something like that together. I'm blown away. So for someone who is listening, who is starting to consider sort of a path to parenthood that might not be the norm, what's the first thing you want them to know?
Take a deep breath. It's a marathon, not a sprint. And you are in full control of this journey. And I think one thing that we didn't realize was that there's pause points throughout the journey. And so you can take a break. You can, get your sperm tested if you're, a male that needs to do that part and stop, right? You can go freeze your eggs. You can pause. You can create your embryos. You can pause. And so there's so many pieces that you can pause at, but also you're your greatest advocate in this journey. So no one else is going to push it along except for you. So you're the one who has to keep on having the conversations and asking the questions and doing some of the research and really pushing everyone along on the journey, because I think, we thought that it was going to start and it was just going to rush and we're going to have a baby, when really there's not going to be any movement unless you're pushing the journey along.
Yeah.
And so I think that's really important for people to understand.
I think for someone who's listening who is having to work through this process is understanding, number one, be kind to yourself. There's so many people that we meet who beat themselves up, regardless of who they are, and be patient with yourself and take care of yourself, right? Like, don't forget, at the end of this, you will have a child, right? And you have to be the best person for yourself for that child, right? And you want to make sure that, number one, a lot of people forget about their mental health as they're going through this. Take care of yourself. If you don't have a therapist, you're not talking to someone, go get one, right? Like, that's really, really important. So be kind to yourself and be patient with yourself, but also you're not alone. There are thousands of people who have been through your same journey in some way, shape, or form. Reach out to them. As we were talking about on this podcast, create your extended family, create your tribe, because there are so many people who will hold your hand. To the women that I've had conversations with who their husband didn't want to join the call with them, to that single parent who wasn't sure if they wanted to move forward because they didn't have a significant other, forget about all of that, right? Like, as George shared, like, this is about you. This is your journey. Take your time and you will get to where you want to be.
And a lot of people think that just because you have a partner, a husband or a wife or whoever, doesn't mean you need to get a therapist. You should still get one, because your partner is not there to be your therapist.
That
right?
is true.
There's so many things that that's a lot of stress that you put on each other to kind of unload that. Get a therapist to do that. And that'll help you immensely. And so I think that's another good point to make.
And if you're both struggling and you're both grieving, then you're likely not in the right headspace to be able, you can't say, a drowning person can't save someone else who's drowning. And so, when you're both in that, I think that is such an important tip. Okay. So what's next for you both? I mean, one, I can hear the little pitter patters behind.
Yeah.
I know that they're close, and I don't want to keep you much longer, but what's next for you? How can people support you, follow along? Well, you'll send me all your links. We'll have them in the show notes, of course, but if people want to get involved or, what else would you like to share about that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess first, if you're listening, follow us on Families Out Loud on Instagram. It's at families_out_loud. That's where we post a lot of our content and upcoming events, all that stuff, even just like helpful educational information too. And you can also always ask us questions. Just DM us, send us a DM. But we'll also be in San Diego next, July 11th and July 10th and 11th. So really excited. So if they'd like to grab tickets, that you can find them on our website, familiesoutloudevents.com. We just rebranded our website and it's beautiful. Mike actually did it himself. So shout out, Mike. And so, yeah, you can find all the information there, all of our sponsors that we work with. But yeah, did I miss anything?
No, I just think that following us, but just word of mouth, right? Like, even if you have your family, and even if, if you wish that you had access to us, right? Like, we do meet so many people who are saying, I wish that you existed. Don't forget about us still, right? So as you're having dinner with someone somewhere and they start telling you about their journey, please tell them about us, tell them about our website and about our Instagram, and really, just sharing as much as you can, about Families Out Loud, and making sure that it's a known resource for people out there.
Yeah. Everyone's has that friend or that sister or that brother who's like had the experience of going through 5 cycles and spending $60,000. There's options out there, and just because it hasn't happened yet doesn't mean it's not going to happen. Like, it can happen still, and like, we want to help you figure out how to do it.
Well, I have been so uplifted from this conversation. I can't imagine how anybody could walk away from this and not feel hopeful and feel much more empowered. And so I just, from the bottom of my heart, I thank you. And I just want to close with the idea that I want to reassure everyone, if you're in that place where you feel that it's your purpose to become a parent and you have no idea how that's going to happen, I want, as you had said, take a deep breath and know that if this is a big part of your purpose, you can make it happen. I always say that with knowledge, courage, determination, and a village that loves you, all things are possible. And so keep that in mind, and we will talk again soon.